Every little helps when it comes to the climate crisis. Or does it? We are experiencing the biggest crisis the world has ever faced, the climate and ecological emergency. Already we are seeing migration, poverty, war and death due to extreme weather events such as floods, droughts, heat waves, forest fires and hurricanes. So we need everyone to do what is necessary to turn things around. A few weeks ago, I was attracted by a headline in The Guardian. It was, "What green habits have you adopted in 2020? And lots of people had written in to say what they'd done, using lime juice to clean in the bathroom, growing their own vegetables, buying locally, cycling more, and litter picking, amongst other things. But I'm afraid I didn't feel a surge of hope or a feeling that Guardian readers were finally taking on the climate crisis in a meaningful way. As it happens, I do a lot of those things. I grow my own veg, often buy locally. I cycle around Oxford and I buy my electricity on a renewable energy tariff. And most people I know are trying to do something to make a difference, whether it's using energy efficient light bulbs, buying an electric car, or eating a plant-based diet. So will all these individual steps add up? And considering the scale of the problem, is it really enough to be encouraging our friends and neighbours to change their habits? Let's just imagine we took an individual small steps approach to tackling a global pandemic. I guess this is how it would look. You and I, the enlightened ones, would start wearing masks, even though we felt stupid and odd doing it, and washing our hands more. We'd try to persuade our employers to let us work at home. We'd see our families less often, and we'd be on social media trying to persuade others to do the same. Do you really think that would have been sufficient to slow the spread of the virus in 2020? Would we have had enough people taking these steps? Who could have afforded to stay at home and not work? How long would it have taken to get the government or some enlightened philanthropist to fund the development of a vaccine? And just how many people would we have had to persuade to do these things in order to have an effect? Whatever you think about how effective the local and global responses to the pandemic of 2020 have been, they have clearly been quite different from the way we as individuals currently respond to the challenge of climate change. For COVID-19, governments have poured money into the health service. They have supported individuals and businesses. They've written new laws changing the way we live, and they've funded the development and purchase of vaccines. Businesses have responded to the situation in record speed. Gin distillers making hand sanitizer, market traders going online, office workers working at home. The media has explained the science, told the stories and delivered important messages. And of course, the general public have done lots of things, putting on masks in public places, working at home, using hand sanitizer, not seeing friends and relatives. And what has kept us all going? The belief that this too will pass. There is life on the other side. There's a vision of a back to normal world to work towards. Just as the science about the pandemic is clear, so the science about climate change is clear. To prevent climate breakdown, action is needed from all actors immediately. We urgently need large-scale changes in our economies and societies. Businesses, governments and individuals cannot solve climate change in isolation. We must work together. Each actor must make the necessary changes. Individual action alone will not be quick enough or big enough. Unless the changes to the system are well underway within the decade, we will be in extreme danger. And currently, governments and businesses are responsible for the majority of the carbon savings needed. But does that mean we should just sit back and point the finger, claiming it's not our responsibility? I don't think so. I want to tell you about someone who's recently been in the news. Rosamond Kissey, a secondary school teacher from South East London. In February 2013, she watched her 9-year-old daughter Ella die of acute respiratory disease. Ella had a severe and rare form of asthma, and in the 3 years before she died, she had been admitted to hospital 27 times, suffering acute asthma attacks. And every one of her severe attacks had coincided with a rise in air pollution. After Ella's death, Rosamond could have resigned herself to her daughter's death as a tragic fact of life. Or she could have taken some small steps. She could have stopped driving a car. I don't know, maybe she did. Or she could have encouraged her friends not to drive, or at least to drive less. That is not what Rosamond did. Motivated by love, she tapped into her anger and she told the media, her MP, the Mayor of London, the government, in fact anyone who would listen, and plenty who didn't want to, that air pollution had to come down drastically to prevent unnecessary deaths. And she demanded to know who was responsible for Ella's death. She went to court. 7 years on, and a second inquest is considering whether the state failed in its duty to keep a person safe by allowing legal air pollution levels to be breached. And Rosamond now uses her voice to campaign tirelessly as a World Health Organization advocate. But I'm not here to talk about air pollution, or really about Rosamond, inspiring though she is. I want us to learn from her individual response to an unimaginably awful situation. When it comes to climate change, individual action is important, but not just in terms of our personal consumption. We need to influence government, business and media if we're going to have the kind of response we need to this crisis. How can we do that as individuals? Only you know whose ear you have, where your money is invested, or who you can influence. What I do know is that it's important not to underestimate what you can achieve. Let me give you just a few examples of individuals who, alone or collectively, have influenced government or business. We've already heard about Rosamond. And then there's the wheelchair users who got fed up with the discrimination they faced in the 1970s, and hundreds of them protested, some locking themselves to buses and trains which they were unable to access. This led to the Disability Act, which protects the rights of people with disabilities today. Or how about the shareholders in Glencore, a producer of coal, oil and gas? They used their influence, and now Glencore has agreed to cap its coal production. Or consider the activists in Alaska who put pressure on Goldman Sachs, one of the banks funding drilling for oil in the Arctic, and eventually the bank announced it was no longer interested in funding drilling in the Arctic. I'm not going to tell you what to do, but I am asking you to consider the scale of the problem and compare it to the action you take. What do you want to say? Who do you want to say it to? Who can you join up with? Who can you influence? Where can you put your money? So does every little help when it comes to the climate crisis? If we think back to the response to the pandemic, yes, absolutely. Everyone needs to make small actions, not just the government, business and the media. It's important that how we live backs up our words and supports any positive action government or business take. We can't continue to actively destroy the world with our lifestyles and expect to have influence. So, let's grow our own vegetables, put solar panels on our roofs, go vegan, switch to a renewable energy supplier, give up the car, take part in litter picking, consume less, reuse more. We could even try using lime juice for cleaning the bathroom. But remember, it's a question of scale. If you wanted to build a house, you wouldn't start with a box of Lego bricks. Or if you wanted to dig over your new allotment, you'd use a spade, not a teaspoon. What I think we need is to have a vision of a just society in a beautiful, recovering, natural world which will sustain us all for many generations to come. And we need our love to channel our anger. Ultimately, I think that Rosamond's anger and energy to campaign for an end to air pollution comes from her fierce love for her child and any other child or parent at risk from air pollution. So will your love and anger make you reuse a plastic bag or cycle more? Or is the scale of the crisis and the vision of a recovering world sufficient for you to take big steps as well as small by making sure your voice is heard, as well as adopting some green habits?